What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video I'm going to continue with my intro to computer hardware playlist or series, and we're going to talk about power supplies and specifically speaking power supply cables. Now if you're about to build your first computer and you don't really understand what all of the connectors do or what they connect to, we're going to go ahead and cover it today. And you know what? When you're building your first PC, it can be a little bit overwhelming because look, you have a lot of different connectors here, and while some of them look very similar, they're not interchangeable. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to kind of go over each one of these connectors and show you how they connect to your PC or where they connect in your computer. And then hopefully by the end of the video, you understand this a little bit better. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's start with the 20 or 24 pin connector. It is the main connector that provides power to the motherboard and anything connected to it. Most motherboards these days will require or use the 24 pin connector because the extra 4 pins provide power to the PCI Express slots, which is where your graphics card will go, and they usually require additional power. Some graphics cards are able to be powered by the PCI Express slot alone, not needing additional power cables to be connected to them. Like most of these connectors, it is keyed and can only fit one way into the motherboard. Next is the CPU 4 pin or 8 pin EPS. These connectors provide power to the CPU socket, and your PC will not be able to function without connecting it. It will be keyed and may also be labeled to help identify it. There are a few different possibilities as far as what connectors your board may have. You could have just an 8 pin, you may have an 8 pin and a 4 pin, or an 8 pin and an 8 pin. The 4 pin connector will supply about 155 watts, and the 8 pin or the 4 plus 4 pin will supply about 235 watts. It is possible for your PC to function on the 8 pin alone, but that is only if you do not plan to overclock. However, if you do plan to overclock, make sure you connect all required cables to your board. When you buy your PSU, verify that it has the proper cables and connectors needed for your CPU and GPU. Speaking of GPUs, next up we have the PCI Express cables. Now while the ATX connector provides 75 watts to the PCIe slot, most graphics cards will require more than that to function and maintain stability. Like I mentioned earlier, there are cards that can function just fine from the power provided from the PCI slot alone, but for more power hungry GPUs, you will need to connect the 6 or 8 pin cables. This will usually come in the form of a 6 plus 2 pin connector. There will be a 6 pin that provides the power and an additional 2 pin which is used for ground. Your GPU may require up to 2 of these 8 pin connectors, so verify that your PSU can handle what your build requires before you buy. Next is the SATA or serial ATA power cables. These cables power all SSDs other than your M.2 SSDs, hard drives, CD, DVD drives, and these cables can also power certain components of your AIO. They also power RGB and fan hubs. They have 15 pins and an L-shaped design. These connectors also replace Molex connectors, which were a little bit more difficult to work with and have been slowly phased out over the years by the SATA power cables. Molex connectors were terrible. Basically, whoever invented them didn't even think about the fact that nerds like me would be using them. Pins never lined up right. They were basically awful to work with. I'm glad Molex connectors are on their way out, but you may still find them on certain power supplies today just because certain components still use them. Alright guys, so that's pretty much all there is to it when it comes to power supplies. Just keep in mind that a lot of these connectors are keyed, and usually by now a lot of manufacturers will go ahead and label those connectors, so it's pretty hard to kind of get them confused or mixed up. Whatever you do, if you're trying to build your system and you notice that there is some type of resistance when you're trying to insert the connector into the socket or whatever, that you just kind of stop, double check, and that you make sure that it is actually supposed to go where you're trying to, insert it. So if you're trying to hook up the CPU connector and you start to get a little bit of resistance, just kind of double check and make sure that you're using the right connector. And a few additional tips when it comes to picking out a power supply. Basically, if your budget will allow it, go ahead and try to get a modular power supply or at least a semi-modular power supply, because this will allow you to use only the cables you need to and then store the rest in the box that it came in or the bag that it came in. Basically, it's going to be a lot less mess. You're going to have a lot less cables that you have to manage. And then two, if you're not really sure how big of a power supply you need, you can use calculators online from Newegg or PC Part Picker. And I think even Micro Center has one now, to where you pick the components that you are using, whether it be your CPU or GPU, you kind of throw all that in, and what this will do is the website will calculate everything for you and give you a wattage that you need to buy. But guys, that's pretty much it when it comes to power supplies and the cables and the connectors. If there's anything that you feel like I left off, or if there's another question or anything that you need to know about power supplies, go ahead and drop those down in the comment section below. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I'll see you all in the next video.